Okay, thank you so much for. Okay, to get a panel discussion before we start arguing over the slide and stuff. let's start it simple. Okay, so how did it all started? Like for example, let's start with Koo. You said you work in the DBS as an analyst, at OCBC as an analyst. So how do you get your first step into the banks? What do you do before that? And also, what's the daily activity? And what do you actually do as an analyst at the banks?
Well, okay. I wish it's not recorded, but anyway.
You can save those sensitive stuff. Yeah.
How I came into this field is because actually I started with econometrics. I started with econometrics and I studied econometrics. And the reason why I studied econometrics is, I think like all undergrads is, hey, I can use econometrics to make money from stocks. I think like all undergrads will have thought of that, or at least for me itself. So I started with using econometrics, and that's how I actually came about with the different types of statistical model. I get very intrigued by all these maths itself, all the Greek letters and all the alphabets and algebra and linear algebra and so on and so forth. Anyway, so I took up econometrics as a module in my undergrad years itself. And from there, right, unfortunately, I came out in the year of SARS, and it was very harsh for a non-experienced undergrad itself, and I have extreme difficulty to actually find a job, even though I'm an econs major. Very extreme. It was a very bad time. I also don't want to revisit it again. Anyway, the thing is that after that, I managed to land a job in a research institution that actually research on education. I won't say that's a very good break for me, but it is a break in the sense that actually from there, right, because it's academic background itself, I get to learn a lot more techniques, or actually understand what are the techniques available. Like for instance, the SEM that I just quoted, right, I learned it from there. I also learned about this thing called a hierarchical linear regression, which is actually commonly used in social science. I see it being used in the business itself. Categorical data analysis, and there was this big, huge book, I'm sure a lot of people would know, which is written by Alan Agresti, Categorical Data Analysis. It's a very huge book, and I think now it's already went to the 8th edition. When I started working was, I think, 4th or 5th edition. So that's where I started to learn how to actually build models. What are the things we look out for when you actually build models itself? Thank goodness things have picked up after that. I went to the banks itself, and it really opened my eyes, like what I've seen and what I've shared with a lot of students.
And good money.
Good money, I'll hold that, I'll hold to that. But anyway, yeah, so from the banks, I get to learn the whole thing about application of analytics. From the data management, all the way down to the validation itself, and what happens during the validation, and what happens after the validation. I think it's something where maybe not a lot of people will get the exposure unless they really stay in a particular function and use the models throughout the whole life cycle. Because even if you're at a consultancy firm, or if you're at a vendor management firm itself, right, this validation piece itself will never be exposed to you. You won't be able to actually have that kind of exposure. So after that 4 years itself in the banks, I also done a lot of reporting. I also done some very simple simulation and all this, and also some of compliance reports. So these are all the things, and it sharpens my skill, because then compliance reports, right, sometimes the compliance report, when they ask a particular question itself, they are not very definite. That's where I get to learn a bit more about data definition, what the importance of data definition itself, and so on and so forth. Then after that, from the banks, I move on to over here, because I want to learn a bit more about the different techniques and also the different industries and how they actually use analytics. So that's my whole journey. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, thank you. How about you, Eugene? How did you get started, and then what was it like right at the start before you had all this analyst first and all this?
Well, you know how much I love talking about myself.
Yeah.
But I can tell you very quickly, but I'll tell you something more important, which is that it doesn't matter. One of the reasons I do analyst first, one of the reasons I'm so passionate about these issues, and I am still very passionate and positive about analytics field in spite of my misgivings, I don't want people to waste 20 years on what should take 3 or 5. I feel like I've made I've had a hard going, I've made a lot of mistakes, and there were a lot of resources and opportunities and developments that weren't available when I started. I mean, I first, this is really scary, isn't it? We all wanted to do analytics because we thought we could predict the stock market. and it's gone full circle, because guess what I've been doing in my spare time on the flights between various Asian capitals in the last month? I'm writing code, I'm back in the markets again. I'm using predictive modeling. Some things never change. So 20 odd years ago, I was fascinated at a philosophical level by this idea that there is this thing called supervised machine learning, which in that case was primarily neural networks, and the sort of very computer sciencey, cognitive sciencey sort of analog of human cognition. So it wasn't just all numbers and algorithms. It was like, wow, we can probably understand how the human brain works. Well, I was fascinated by that, and then I was fascinated by this idea of forecasting stocks. Before I knew it, I'd done a PhD in it. I ran away from the lab because I decided I didn't want to be an academic, which in Australia means a person who works in academia. I got into consulting, and I got into analytics consulting pretty quickly. I went into business on my own pretty quickly, which was a really dumb idea way back then. And I went into futures trading, building trading systems, and I learned a lot. And as you can see, I'm a billionaire, right? No, I'm not a billionaire. Luckily, I didn't lose too much money. And since then, I've moved around many different industries, applications, and fields. So I've been in-house, I've been a consultant, I've got a few startups. I'm primarily in training more than consulting now. But look, that's all irrelevant, because what it takes to become a good data scientist now is nothing like what I had to do. And frankly, I'd rather spare people the pain of my experience than bore you with it.
Okay. So we have heard like a lot of all this. It seems like there's a lot of requirement to be a data scientist, a lot of skills, a lot of stuff. So for people who don't really want to be a data scientist, just want to be involved in this business, is there a role for people to play, even if they don't want to spend the next 50 years of their life studying data science? Is there a role for people who are like not that technical to play?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, my contention is that data science is not this thing that data scientists do. Well, it is, but data literacy, scientific literacy, is transformative. It's just like 3,000 years ago, you might have been asking, Sumerian businessmen whether they think that there is room for counting and arithmetic and writing beyond, the highly specialized scribes that can do it, because real business people didn't bother themselves with IT stuff like arithmetic and reading. There was a time when those were weird little IT skills that nerds did. Now it's ridiculous to think about anyone in business who can't read and write and can't count. Well, I think in 10 years' time it'll be ridiculous to think about anyone in business who doesn't know what a probability distribution is, which, by the way, is one of our biggest literacy issues. It'll be ridiculous to talk about someone in business who doesn't understand the idea of making decisions based on data. And it won't be clear on what is the role of a manager other than to make intelligent decisions, possibly informed by a data scientist. You don't need to be able to drive an 11-layer deep neural network, but you need to be able to take the insights a data scientist gives you and think about them, and you need to understand that data is valuable. So yeah, data is going to be everybody's business. And what I'm seeing in the Australian government in particular is there are people who are being dragged kicking and screaming into it. So there are all these public servants who might have not done any mathematics since the 10th grade and might have seen their job as being just primarily process workers. But guess what? If you're a process worker, we've got an app for that. Process work is being automated out of existence. So I've actually delivered training to people who are finding themselves having to embrace a certain level of what I call data literacy. So not specialized data science, but a heck of a lot more data science than they probably want to be doing, just in order to keep their jobs. So yeah, and then with management, I think the only kind of manager in the future is going to be a data literate manager.
And for Koo, what do you think of Eugene's comment, especially for Singapore and in the Singapore's context? Can we really train like all Singaporeans, even like for example the issue she has mentioned already? Can we really train everyone to be like literate in data science?
I think my personal opinion when it comes to these programs itself, right, is these programs is enough to start you on the journey. It's a never-ending journey to be very upfront here, because the field of statistics, the field of optimization itself is still growing. Even like for instance, and when it comes to analyzing data, the amount of data that we're capturing, we only just started analyzing text data which is natural language processing, only started which is in the 1950s. And ask yourself the question of how many languages are there out there. And the definition of language is a proof language. There are also other kinds of what we call pidgins, P-I-D-G-I-N-S, which is actually
You mean
just
like Singlish?
yeah, right, yes, like English itself, where it's just a mix of all the different words itself, and you have to get a computer to actually understand that. So that's the language itself, that's the textual data itself. I move on to audio. That's the audio part where, like for instance, how do you, from the speech itself, how do you actually get a person's emotion? You can actually have an algorithm trained to actually do that kind. But based on my understanding that the algorithm's accuracy rate hasn't been satisfactory to go commercial yet, that's one thing. Then how about images, like for instance, facial recognition, like for instance, pictures and all these, picture files and all this, so it still take a while. Only recently I posted one article which is on item recognition. So now it has moved on to that as well. I mean, the field is growing out. The field is growing out there, and the only thing I can feel is that the program only just put you at a starting point, give you enough skills and enough tools actually at the starting point, and then you start running. How fast or how slow is really dependent on the person's character, the person's passion, the person's understanding, quickness of understanding, and so on and so forth. And then we will see how far they have moved from the starting point itself. And don't treat it as a race. Don't treat it as a race, but treat it as something where it's a learning journey, and you can actually, from a starting point itself, right, move in different directions that you choose to move, and not like in a race where you only move one direction, which is forward, straight in time. So I think I might digress here a bit. So coming back, I think the programs itself, I think it's a good starting point to have if you want to start on the journey of data scientist.
I'd like to open up the floor to some questions. I still have some questions collected over the last few weeks, but is there any burning questions you'd like to ask our panel?
How do you create a vacancy for data scientists in a company? Let's say I want to work as a data scientist. My company doesn't have that job. I want to create a vacancy. I'm interested in what kind of practical way to do it. I mean, overall, I think we've heard example, find a case, create it, convince management so that they're convinced in this, and then start on it. But how long is that journey? Is it something that you will bring up that, hey, I predict that with this, you can increase sales by 7%, they'll say, okay, let's wait for another year, let's see if your prediction is correct, and we'll do it. Or is there another better way?
You hire Eugene and connect him to management.
Eugene will take his job.
I don't want to take your job. I want you to have a very big job. Yeah, hire me. Look, the first question
is very soon. I don't want to hire a junior person.
What you're really asking is,
I'll make you coffee.
what you're really asking is, how do you put together a business case for data science? And the question you're really asking about is, what are the incentives of the people with the money in your organization?
I understand that part. So let's say, for example, my case, the incentive is increase in sales. And
That's their stated business objective. I mean their real incentive. Like, do they want to stay in the company? Do they care about whether the company lives or dies? You know, you really need to understand what's behind the theatre and behind the the official KPIs. You got to, unfortunately, in some organisations, these are the realities you need to embrace. In order to do something good, you need to embrace things that are unpleasant but true. In other organisations, particularly smaller organisations, startups, privately owned small to mediums, I think having a nice, honest conversation with the management might be what you need to do. I also find that in those situations where people have real incentives, sticks are better than carrots. What do I mean by that? It's one thing to say, hey, there's this amazing thing called data science and you can benefit from it in all these wonderful ways, right? Well, this person is being inundated with business proposals of all the different wonderful ways in which things can be done every day. On the other hand, if you say, here is the risk of you not doing it, here is the risk to your company of a massive fraud, or here is the risk to your company just if your competitors out maneuvering you and not keeping an eye open. Here is an example of a company that didn't keep their eye open and they went under yesterday and they're in your industry. I found that in those cases, when people really do have personal incentives that are aligned with the incentives of the organisation, then sticks work better than carrots. When their interests are not aligned, when really they're an employee who's going to make money or find another job if the company goes under, whatever happens, I don't think analytics works very well as an incentive. then your only play is a vanity play. And frankly, I don't want to be part of that project. Maybe you do, I wouldn't.
I understand. I guess what I'm trying to clarify is that, let's say the assumption is there, that there is an alignment in incentive. So we bring a solution that ties with that, and we need to prove that this solution, meaning data scientists, data analytics, can actually solve that.
You can't prove. Look,
You
if it's
can't
real data
evaluate.
science, okay, you're talking about a specific engineering application for a specific problem. I don't think
Not a tool,
Okay.
but an approach to
Okay, but-
prove to the company that data analysis or work of exploration in data can actually help them in the area that aligns with their KPI. And like what you say, data science is an exploration. There's no guarantee. So how is the best way to prove this?
Unfortunately, it goes back to via negativa. Unfortunately, you're saying, how do I make sure that this particular company gets it? And I'm saying to you, most of them don't. It's the hardest trick in the world. I'd rather look for the ones that do than try to make any one of them get it, because most of them just won't, for reasons of understanding and reasons of incentive. So there are no easy answers.
So it's either you can sell the idea or you can't. And
If
you
they're,
will go on.
if they're really hungry, great. If they're not, if you have no choice but to be there, if you're stuck there, I'd look for pain points, and I'd look for pain points of individuals, not just the abstract pain points of the organisation. But honestly, I'd rather look for organisations that get it and have a real need.
Got anything you like to say?
No, I kind of agree with what Eugene has mentioned himself. I mean, I go out and talk to industry to get them interested on doing analytics, and then after that, pass analytics over to our students to actually do it. So I do not know. I haven't tried Eugene's method. Probably I can try that. But what I can share is what I usually do is that I immediately will ask the person, you want to perform well? I'm pretty sure you want to perform well in your job function. Tell me what's your KPI. Tell me your KPI, tell me the data you collect. I do the linking for you. I do the link up for you, I get you interested. I say, I can't guarantee, but because I think why I say that is that no information sometimes is also good information as well. So the thing is that I'll talk to them and tell them that, hey, I'm able to help you to achieve your KPI. And usually, once that sentence is out, right, the ear starts to, or the attention starts to focus on me. I said, oh, really? Okay, let's see how it goes. And then that's where I start to do the sales talk and to get the analytics project. But anyway, coming back, the thing is that I think the thing is once you build a particular value or a value pipeline itself, right? Once that pipeline gets very strong, they will think that these companies will start thinking that, hey, yeah, probably I need to get a junior one, so I can keep this within my own organization rather than working together with another organization. So that's how I try to build in terms of data science. Yeah.
I'll just add, you made a very important point, Koo. The moment it's important, the moment it's strategic, it's taken in-house. There was a point you made that was really important, which was that, yeah, it definitely has to go in-house. It definitely has to have internal resourcing, and there definitely has to be that bridge with management when they realise the value. They don't want to keep outsourcing, and you'll get to grow your own function.
Any other questions for our panelists? Okay, then we'll go on to another question asked is about, let's say we don't have any data. Back to the probably some of the issues that we are raising out just now. Let's say we have not enough data. Then let's say we don't have we don't know what we supposed to do with this thing. Then should we still do data science?
Okay. So actually, further to your question, and this relates to your question as well. Very often, you have the sort of management who aren't averse to the idea of data science, but they'll say, look, we're not ready for it. We're not ready for it because our data's not right, we don't have the right systems, we don't have the right people. They're not qualified to decide whether they're ready or not. They have no idea whether they're ready or not. And usually, the point is they're usually, I think, brainwashed by the kinds of primarily software vendors who say, look, unless you buy all of this kit and spend all of this money and go on this long journey, you're not ready. I think the messy data you've got is more valuable at doing something with it than doing nothing with it. I think doing something with it is very easy and very cheap. What happens if there's no data? That's great. That's actually a good thing because, you know, there's that analogy of, you know, guys sort of on his knees and feeling around in the dark, and not the dark, under a lamppost, and the other one said, oh, what are you doing? I'm looking for $1. Where did you lose it? Over there. Well, why are you looking for it here? This is where the light is. This is how I see a lot of the big data. You know, it's like the real questions we have are over there, but all of our enormous transactional data is actually, you know, about something else. But hey, we've got all this enormous transactional data, and that's what the big data stuff is all about. What if you have no data, and particularly if you have no data about what matters? Well, collect it. Do surveys. Take surveys of your management, but use intelligent methods of combining data. Use all your analytics and machine learning smarts and your statistical smarts to combine not a lot of data. Maybe put your operational systems in place to actually collect the transactional big data that you care about as well. And the last point you made was, is there a room for data science? It may be that there is initially no room for data science, like the uncle and auntie running the hawker stall. I don't think they have a business case for data science, but they sure as heck have a business case for intelligence/science. There's always a business case for intelligence and science, and the first thing you should do is set up an intelligence function. There should be someone whose job it is night and day to worry about intelligence. Whether it's data-based intelligence or not is a second question.
For Koo, or you want to add?
Let me add on to that. Okay. Fortunately, my job, right, when I talk to the industry itself to get them interest on analytics, they don't have data. The only common issues that they have is like what Eugene has mentioned. I'm not ready. My data is not ready for any analytics or any data science itself. So what I usually would do is this: I'll tell them that it's the same analogy. Let's say you caught yourself in a very dark room. Any form of light is a good form of light. You got data means you got light. It's just a matter of how much light you can actually get from that particular data itself to help you shine through the room. So and that itself, right, usually again get them started. Oh, you mean I can do that? And hey, I can hit my KPI with the data. Oh, why not? That gets one actually excited based on that itself. That's how I convince them.
You also mentioned intuition as a very important part of doing analytics, but isn't intuition a bit against data science because it's like so not scientific, it's just gut feel kind of thing. So how does it reconcile?
Okay, wait. I think when it comes to intuition, what I want to say is this. The thing is that if you understand right, you cannot let a model totally run a decision or make a decision. There is always this part where you also need a human judgment that comes into the picture. So let me give an example of something that I got learned from the bank itself. Let's say for instance you look at a credit scorecard. A credit scorecard will score every one of us on the basis of how high our probability of default is. Now the thing is this: the bank has to decide at a certain cutoff who are the people we can give and who are the people who cannot give. Now this cutoff itself, we probably can get a model to do it, but the thing is that in the banks I've seen so far, right, what they did is that they actually have a human judgment to actually make a decision on where to cut off, because there are other considerations like, for instance, economy, income, and so on and so forth. So that's where the human judgment comes in to actually make a moderation as to how to use the particular credit risk scorecard itself. Then another example I'd like to give is that I'm sure you all still remember that this Amazon book that actually cost $36 million. Was it $36 million? Yeah. It was shown. I think it was shown a few years ago when Amazon probably started using the pricing models itself. And the book actually shot up to $36 million, which no one would particularly go and buy it unless they are unless they are Warren Buffett or whatever.
I reach the I reach app, you know, kind of thing. I can buy this.
Yeah, I can buy the $36 million book itself. So I do believe that when it comes to analytics, when it comes to model building, and when it comes to even model usage itself, right, you still need some human judgment and human decision into actually how to make these models itself.
I think any risk officer will have trouble explaining to compliance why he made his decision based on his hunch.
Or one of the least scientifically literate functions in the business.
Look, don't mix the thing. We don't mix here. We're talking about big data science or data science or analytics functions general, right? So I think we're a bit mixing for this question, like you persuade your management to open a big science department, it's not the same as opening the analytic department. The analytics should be there already, otherwise if they have to decide. It's the extent of penetration on
You want to talk a bit about intuition?
Look, there's a fundamental difference between saying we're going to use intuition instead of science versus saying we're going to use intuition to guide science. And finally, there's the third thing, which is we acknowledge that some of our data and some of our inference, some of our intelligence happens outside of our electronic systems. It happens in the brains of very important people. Your ultimate information fusion leading to the decision is in a human brain. Everything that comes out of a model or a big eye system goes into a human brain. So that's where the fusion happens. So yeah, intuition and non-electronic stuff has a role to play. The question is the empirical stuff, is the electronic, scientific, empirical stuff completely absent or does it have a role? And as Koo says, has a role.
Relating to the having intelligence function as part of the bank or as part of the company, I heard some companies or banks have already this so-called research department. Isn't that related to that? I mean, in terms of like discovery and acquiring new knowledge, or is it totally different from that sort of function?
God, it really gets Dilbert-esque, you know. There are any number of analytics functions in a large organization, I find. I was talking to people from a particular bank recently. I did this presentation in a bank, and they said, and they were all from different analytics areas in the bank, and they're all saying, yes, we're all working on vanity projects, yes, it's terrible, yes, our managers don't really understand what we do, yes, millions of dollars are being spent on us, but we're not really getting anywhere, and yes, even more millions are being spent on vendors. But then one of them said, you know, we actually have an actual intelligence function in the business. Really? Yes. Yeah, you know, they're the ones who keep, you know, grabbing data off IT, and IT can't stop them. And they're the ones who keep poaching the really good people who disappear, and no one knows what they do, and then they do something new all the time. And they're not called intelligence; they're called strategy. Now, this was funny to me because I always know that the one thing strategy functions in most large organizations don't do is strategy. They always do something else. But this was an actual strategy function, which also happened to be an actual strategic intelligence function. It does happen, but where it sits, what its name is, what its mandate is, that can all vary. And sometimes it's not there at all.
Okay, so if you have any other questions, the panel will still be around for if you want further discussion. So that's it. Then we wrap up our NTB for today. Thank you so much for coming.